Hello, fifth graders. So today we are going to learn how to add and subtract decimals. So throughout this topic, we've learned how to round decimals. We've learned how to estimate decimals. We've learned how to do some mental math using decimals. And now we're going to learn how to add and subtract decimals. So when adding and subtracting decimals, you want to make sure the decimal points are always stacked on top of one another. That is really, really important. So your decimal point should always be lined up. You never want to see a problem written like that. If you notice, decimal points and decimal points are not lined up. They should form a straight up and down line. So let's look at this example. Now, I actually want you to change something. Instead of adding together 42 and 7/100ths and 38 and 9/10ths, I want you to cross out that addition sign and I want you to put a subtraction sign. So instead, this problem should look like 42 and 7/10ths minus 38 and 9/10ths. So we're subtracting them instead. So the first thing we want to do is we want to fill them out in this chart. Now I made this chart nice and easy, so there actually are decimal places there for you so you know exactly where to put your decimal. The one thing I do want to mention though, if you look, 38 and 9/10ths is the same thing as 38 and 90/100ths. Adding that extra trailing zero, remember, does not affect the value of it. So let's line these up. We're subtracting, so that subtraction sign goes there. We have 42 and 7/100ths minus, now, are we going to write 38 and 9/10ths like that? No, because the decimal point is not lined up, okay? So we would write 38 and 9/10ths, 38 and 9/10ths. And I do always fill in any of the blank spaces with a zero, because remember that extra zero, that trailing zero does not affect it. So now we subtract. Now the big thing with this, look at this little speech bubble. It says, when subtracting, if you cannot subtract the larger number from the smaller number, you learned how to do this, regroup. So basically subtracting and adding decimals is almost identical to just subtracting and adding regular whole numbers, but the only thing that you need to keep in mind is that the decimal points need to be lined up. So again, we start at the right, we do 7 minus 0, and we get 7. Now we have 0 minus 9. Can we do that? Can we take 9 away from 0? No. So what we have to do, we have to look next door at that 2. We regroup it, okay? We take away 10 wholes. That becomes a 1. And we add 10 over here. So that 0 becomes a 10. Now we can do 10 minus 9. And that gives us 1. All right, and then we do again 1 minus 8. Can we do that? 1 minus 8? No, we cannot. We cannot take 8 away from 1, so we have to look next door at that 4. Regroup that 4. The 4 becomes a 3, okay? And then we can add 10 to the other one, so it becomes an 11. And now we can do 11 minus 8, and we get 3. And 3 minus 3 is 0, so we can just leave that blank. So our final answer is 3 and 17/100ths. And that's our final answer. All right, so again, if you look, if you didn't have a decimal point right here, okay, if you didn't have a decimal point there, we would know it went there because you can draw a straight line through all those decimal points. Okay, and basically what you do, you line up the decimals, and then the final answer, the decimal point, gets dropped straight down and the decimal point just goes right underneath all of the other ones. All right, so always make sure the biggest thing is to line up those decimal points. So let's look at the next one. It says when adding and subtracting decimals, make sure the decimal points are always stacked on top of one another. So again, a nice little reminder, make sure they're always stacked on top. So our problem is 54 and 32 hundredths plus 8 and 9 tenths. So again, just a little quick reminder, 8 and 9 tenths is the same thing as 8 and 90 hundredths. Okay, that trailing zero right here, that trailing zero does not affect it. So we can write it out. Again, this little chart right here, I already have the decimal points in, but make sure you're always stacking them. 54 and 32 hundredths. Now, will we write the 8 and 9 tenths like this? Is that how we would fill it in? No, we would not fill it in like that. Will we fill it in like that? No, because the decimal places are still not lined up. We would fill in 8 and 9 tenths, 8 and 9 tenths. And again, I like to just put zeros in all of the blank spaces to help me. So we are adding them together. So we start from the right, just like we would in regular addition. 2 plus 0 is 2. 9 plus 3, 9, 10, 11, 12. Carry that 1 to the top. We have 8 plus 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we have 13. Again, carry that 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. So our final answer, when we add 54 and 32 hundredths plus 8 and 9 tenths, we get 63 and 22 hundredths. All right, so I think the biggest thing from this lesson, guys, the addition and subtraction should not be anything new to you because you've done that before with whole numbers. It's basically the same thing, but now we just have a decimal place. And if you line up those decimal places so they're stacked, your answer, what you'll do is just bring that decimal place straight down and the decimal place goes right underneath in your answer of what you have in the front of your problem. All right, so always bring that decimal place straight down in your answer. All right, so the Google form attached to this is just going to ask you a few more questions on adding and subtracting decimals. All right, so just make sure you review that. I do want to go over one more thing with you guys. So if I have a problem, hold on one second. If I have a problem that looks like this, how would I do that? Because I'm looking right now at my 9, and I don't see any decimal places. So what does 9 actually equal? Because there technically always is a decimal place. Sometimes you just don't see them. So what would 9 be? Where would the decimal place be for 9? Well, any whole number, the decimal place is always at the end. So it would really be 9 point, I know I don't like to say point, 9 and 0 tenths or 0 hundredths. It would look anything like that. You can keep adding those decimal places or those zeros if you want. But really, it would look like that. And this, if you think about it, it's almost like money. $9 looks like this, $9. So now that we know that, now we can stack up those decimal places. 9 minus 4 and 64 hundredths. And we can do it. But remember, you have to regroup if the number underneath is bigger than the number on top. So for example, 0 minus 4, we cannot do. But then we go to this number, 0 again. Can we take anything from that? Nope. So we got to go to the next one. So we regroup the 9. It becomes an 8. Add 10 to the 0, it becomes a 10. But now we can go back, okay? 0 minus 4, we can't do. We look at the 10. It becomes a 9. 10 goes over there. So 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 6, we can do. 9 minus 6 is 3. And 8 minus 4 is 4. And again, guys, you bring the decimal place straight down. And it goes right there. All right? So just keep in mind that if a number does not have a decimal place, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a decimal, okay? It still has decimal. A whole number decimal is always to the right of that number, because you don't want to make the mistake of taking this problem right here, okay, and writing it like this. You don't want to write it like that, because technically, if the decimal place is there, your decimal places are not lined up. All right, so keep that in mind. So complete the Google form attached to the Ed Puzzle. What I am going to say, I want you guys to get a scrap piece of paper, okay, and complete all of the problems on a scrap piece of paper and label each question. So question 1, question 2, question 3, because the very last question on your Google form is going to tell you to upload a photo of your work. Since we're dealing specifically with adding and subtracting, guys, I need to see your work. So do it on one sheet of paper, organize your questions, okay? And then the last question is going to have you submit a picture of your work. So please make sure you do that, all right? Enjoy the rest of your day. Please email me if you have any questions.